Welcome to Practical Piano. In this video, I'll teach you how to make intervals bigger, also called augmented, or smaller, which is what we call diminished. In order to understand this video, you'll need to recognize the intervals in this list. If you do recognize them, that's fantastic. And if not, I've linked them in the iCards and in the description. The other thing you'll need to know is what a half step is, and I'll link that video as well. Before we talk about making these bigger or smaller, we have to talk about a starting point. And our starting point is major, which I'll do MAJ for short, and perfect. PERF for short. So we can go bigger or smaller from here. And if you understand it this way, it's going to make a lot of sense. Now, major and perfect originate from the major scale, which we're not going into depths on today because that will get confusing. But I'll show you the easiest major scale is when we play from C and we play all the white keys and we go to C. If you want to learn how to play this scale, this is called C major scale, and I'll link the video where I teach it in the iCards and description as well. Now in the major scale, if we start on the first note and then we go as far as any other note, we're either going to end up with a major interval or a perfect interval. So if I go C to D, I count 1, 2, this is a major second. 1, 2, 3. C to E is a major third. 1, 2, 3, 4. C to F is a perfect fourth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. C to G is a perfect fifth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. C to A is a major 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. C to B is a major 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. C to C is a perfect octave. And the one that I forgot to mention was the perfect unison. And I often forget it because it's funny. It goes from C to the same C, and that's a unison. So everything contained in the major scale is either major or perfect. Now, if I'm going to make a major interval bigger, that's called augmented. So let's look at that. What are our major intervals? We have major second, major third, major sixth, and major seventh. So C to D is a major interval. If I make it 1/2 step bigger, whenever we make intervals bigger or smaller, it's going to be by 1/2 step. So I take the major second and I move by a 1/2 step to the right, which makes it larger. And this is an augmented second. Now, if you either watched the video about intervals and learned from that, or if you already understood your intervals, you'll also recognize this as a minor third. And this is the confusing thing about theory, is often the same concept has multiple names because it overlaps with other concepts. So don't worry about this being a minor third, because we're thinking in a major second augmented. So let's take the major third and make it 1/2 step bigger. Now we have an augmented third. You'll also recognize this as a perfect fourth, but because we're thinking in thirds, it's an augmented third. Let's take the major sixths. If you make it a 1/2 step bigger, you have an augmented sixth. Let's take the major seventh. If you make it 1/2 step bigger, you have an augmented seventh. So that's how we make our major intervals bigger, or augmented. Now, what if we make our major intervals smaller? Do we get diminished? Not yet. First, we get minor. And in this way, minor is sort of one of a kind. We have a major second. If we make it 1/2 step smaller, then we have the minor second. If we have a major third and we make it 1/2 step smaller, we have a minor third. If we have a major 6, we make it 1/2 step smaller, we have a minor 6. We take a major 7th, we make it 1/2 step smaller. Now we have a minor 7th. You can make your minors bigger and they'll turn major. And you can make majors bigger and they'll turn augmented. All right. Now let's make it even smaller. And now we'll have diminished. Now because we're going smaller, I should have written this arrow actually going down. Forget about this one. So our diminished are 1 step smaller than minor. So if we take a minor second and we make it diminished, C to C is a diminished second. It's also a unison. If we have a minor third, which is C to E flat, and we make it smaller, we have a diminished third. If we have a minor 6 and we make it smaller, we have a diminished 6. And if we have a minor 7th and we make it smaller, we have a diminished 7th. All right, now to make perfect intervals bigger, we make them augmented. So if I have a perfect unison and I make it 1/2 step bigger, now it's an augmented unison, C to C sharp. If I have a perfect fourth and I make it bigger, now it's an augmented fourth, which is also called the I forgot to put it! The tritone. Okay, this should be in the list. It's missing. So again, if we make the perfect fourth augmented, we get a tritone. It's also an augmented fourth. If we make the perfect fifth augmented, we have an augmented fifth. Finally, if we have a perfect octave and we make it augmented, we have an augmented octave. Then we can make our perfect intervals smaller and they'll be diminished. They will not be minor. You cannot make a minor out of a perfect interval. So when you make a perfect interval smaller, it becomes diminished. So we have a perfect unison and we go this way. Now it's a diminished unison, which really doesn't make sense, but it is what it is. Then we have a perfect fourth. If we make it smaller by a half step, then it's a diminished fourth. If we take the perfect fifth, we make it smaller by a half step, we have a diminished fifth. Now we're going to pause here. This is the tritone again. It's from C to F sharp or C to G flat. The tritone is both an augmented 4 and a diminished fifth. We're going to continue with our diminished intervals now. So if we go from C to C, that's a perfect eighth. If we make it a half step smaller, now we have a diminished octave. I said a perfect eighth before. That's not incorrect, but I've been saying perfect octave, so I'll do that again. We have C to C, which is a perfect octave. If we make it a half step smaller, now it's a diminished octave. So that is how you make your intervals augmented and minor and diminished. Augmented and diminished. Let me jot it out for you a little bit clearer because this one ended up being messy. In the description, I'm going to leave a link to a post on x.com, and in that post I'm going to embed an image of this chart. So if you want this chart, go to that post, click on the image. Once you're in the image, right click on it, and from there download it onto your device. It should be in a format that is compatible for printing on standard size letter paper. Alright, thank you for joining me for this theory video. I hope that you found it informative. If there was anything that doesn't make sense, please leave your questions down in the comments and I'll answer them to the best of my ability. If you know anyone else who is also looking to learn about how to make their intervals augmented and diminished, or who isn't clear on what those mean, please share this video with them. If you like it, if you found it useful, please like it, and if you would like more, subscribe.